The President of the United States stood at the edge of the crowd, unnoticed. He wasn't here to give a speech or shake hands for the cameras. Joe Biden was here because of a handwritten letter, a plea for help that had reached his desk, hidden among piles of official correspondence. It was a letter from someone who had lost everything, but not their hope. And tonight, he would remind them why hope still mattered. Washington, D.C. was unusually quiet on that cold December evening. The city, draped in twinkling holiday lights, buzzed with its usual energy, but the warmth of the season rarely reached those who needed it most. President Joe Biden, wrapped in a dark overcoat and scarf, stepped out of his motorcade. He had insisted on keeping the visit off the schedule. No press, no entourage, just himself and 2 security agents. The destination was a small community center tucked away in one of the city's more neglected neighborhoods. It was here that volunteers worked tirelessly to provide shelter, meals, and hope to those who had none. Biden entered quietly, the hum of conversation pausing briefly as heads turned. A few recognized him, their faces a mix of surprise and uncertainty. "Good evening," Biden said warmly, his voice carrying a sincerity that immediately put the room at ease. "I'm not here as your president tonight. I'm here to listen." As he moved through the room, he stopped at a table where a middle-aged woman sat, her hands folded tightly over a worn notebook. Her name tag read Sandra. She was one of the center's coordinators, a former teacher who had dedicated her life to helping others despite her own struggles. "Hi, Sandra," Biden said, pulling up a chair beside her. "Mind if I sit?" Sandra blinked, clearly taken aback. "Of course, Mr. President," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I hear you're the one who keeps this place running," Biden said with a small smile. Sandra hesitated, then shook her head. "I just do what I can, but it's never enough." Biden leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Tell me about it. I want to know what's happening here." Sandra opened her notebook, flipping through pages filled with names, dates, and stories. "These are the people we're trying to help," she said. "Families evicted from their homes, veterans with nowhere to go, kids who've had to grow up too fast. We do what we can, but the funding, it's never enough. And every time we turn someone away, it feels like we're failing them." Her voice cracked, and she looked down, her fingers tightening on the notebook. Biden placed a hand on hers, his voice gentle but firm. "Sandra, you're not failing them. You're doing more than most people ever would. But let's figure out how we can do more." He turned to one of his aides, who had quietly entered the room. "Get me the Department of Housing and Urban Development on the line tomorrow," he said, "and connect me with the local mayor's office. We're going to expand the funding for centers like this one." Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "You mean it?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't," Biden replied. "No one in this country should be left out in the cold." As Biden moved through the center, he stopped again at a corner where a young boy sat quietly, sketching in a notebook. The boy couldn't have been more than 10, his thin frame bundled in a too large coat. Biden knelt beside him, his tone soft. "Hey, what are you drawing?" The boy looked up, startled, then shyly showed him the page. It was a rough sketch of a house, with stick figures standing in front of it. "It's where I want us to live," he said simply. Biden felt a lump in his throat. "What's your name, buddy?" "Marcus," the boy replied. It's just me and my mom now. We had a house, but we lost it. Biden nodded slowly, his mind already working. Marcus, I'm going to make sure you and your mom get a place to stay. Everyone deserves a home. Turning to his aide again, Biden gave instructions to contact local housing programs. Get them temporary housing tonight, he said, and make sure they're on the fast track for permanent assistance. The night wore on, and Biden continued to meet people, each story leaving an indelible mark. There was Tom, a veteran struggling with PTSD who had fallen through the cracks of the system. You served this country, Biden told him, and now it's our turn to serve you. Arrangements were made for Tom to receive the medical care and support he desperately needed. There was Maria, a single mother juggling 2 jobs and still unable to make ends meet. Biden promised to push for better childcare support and living wages. You're not alone in this fight, he told her. By the time Biden left the center, the stars had begun to peek through the cold winter sky. As he stepped outside, he turned to Sandra, who had followed him to the door. You reminded me tonight why we do what we do, he said. It's people like you who keep this country moving forward. Sandra smiled.